To me, next one here, this is the pick of the week. Freaky Tales. Freaky Tales, directed by sorry, Ann Boden and Ryan Fleck. They've done quite a few things that you probably know, but the biggest one is they did, oh my gosh, Captain Marvel? Yes. They've done some big budget movies and some smaller movies too. And this movie, it feels like a movie that's been, and I think if you look at it, it says 2023, but it's finally getting released now. I think it's kind of been shelved. And you can tell that this is one of those movies that had probably some relatively big backing based on some of the people that appear in this movie. And then it has the heart of an indie movie. So I think they didn't really know how to sell it. And it's a hard sell. I bet you they're just kind of dumping this and thinking like, well, we'll give it a quick theater run and then put it on some DVD or put it on a streaming service and it'll be done with it. And I think that's a disservice to this movie. And I think this movie is a ton of fun. I think it's going to it's kind of made for a cult audience, but it still has this kind of a mainstream appeal that I think could work for people. And it definitely will get painted with the woke brush. And I don't think it would care. I think it would put up two middle fingers and say, great, we're woke. You should still enjoy the heck out of this movie. Now, I'm sure it drove some people away with the W word. Oh well. When you hear the sequence, the what this movie is, you should get over yourself. This is an anthology named Freaky Tales. You could tell by the name Freaky Tales. It's a bunch of stories. And you're thinking to yourself, if you're thinking like I was, I'm like, oh, it's going to be horror stories or, Black Mirror kind of stuff. And I was very surprised that it has hardly any thing that's supernatural about it whatsoever, other than this green glow. There's a green glow that kind of links the stories, which is kind of just a MacGuffin. It's kind of like a magical force that just pops up at some point in each of the stories to kind of tie them together. I kind of thought it was akin to the little silver ball that floats through or whatever in heavy metal, or maybe the green glow from Repo Man. Kind of, it's there, but it really isn't there. It really doesn't matter. It's just there as a somewhat fantastical force that just exists in the movie universe. That is it. This takes place in 1987 in Oakland, and that is important. And it has the classic 80s style thing where it's like a scroll of information, of exposition at the beginning with a voiceover telling you kind of about the world. It's interesting and fun just to have. It's very much a throwback. And you find out later that the person doing the voiceover is the classic Oakland rapper, Too Short, who has a role in this movie as a character, even though the actual Too Short, is played by somebody else in this movie. Too Short also has a cameo as a real person in this movie. You just don't know it's him, but if you know it's him, it is. And his voice is the narrator in this movie. Now, why Oakland? Why 1987? Well, this takes place in a universe, an alternate universe, kind of in the same way in Tarantino, you get alternate universes where, the end of the World War II ends differently than it actually does in reality, or the Manson family has a different end than they actually do in reality. This movie has actual events that did occur in the late 80s in Oakland, but in a different version of reality and in a really fun, like, interconnection of these tales. So, and it does another thing. And what I mean by that is so for example, you have real characters like Too Short, a known rapper from Oakland area. You have a real basketball player from the Golden State Warriors. Sleepy Floyd also plays a role in here. But when you see his story, obviously the reality of what's happened is not what happened in Sleepy Floyd's life. There's no way. That's just something to kind of know about this universe. I kind of like what is it? Kevin Smith's world. It's kind of his version of the area that he grew up. This is kind of like an ode to 80s Oakland and legends around Oakland, but also just kind of some fake stories. Now, all that being said, I like how the anthology is set up in the first place. Usually in the anthologies movies, there's these distinct stories, four or five or whatever, and then they have some kind of a tie together, wrap around linking device. This one is a little more like Trick or Treat, where you have four stories all taking place at the same time in the same universe, and the characters from the different stories crisscross or flow into other stories, even though it's not their main story, they will appear in other stories. That I really like a lot more because it makes it like a whole little mini universe. and you're seeing these different stories, but you find them all interconnecting eventually. And that's a little, like I said again, like Tarantino-ish as well, like a Pulp Fiction-y kind of thing, where you have if you kind of think about it, there's different three or four different stories interlinking in Pulp Fiction. Well, this kind of does the same thing for these Oakland Tales, Freaky Tales. Probably wanted to call it Oakland Tales, and they probably didn't because people would be like, "Why is that going to sell? Freaky Tales sounds better," So whatever. And I haven't said anything about the actual stories. So several different stories here. First of all, no, let's just tell you the basic stories. So the first one, Strength in Numbers. Basic idea is you have a very famous punk club, hardcore punk, underground music club in Oakland, and they have an encounter with Nazi skinheads, and essentially it becomes a battle battle between punks and Nazis. I can really appreciate that because having been a punk in the 80s and having Nazi skinheads be hated, you look at the famous song by the Dead Kennedys from the Bay Area, which doesn't appear here surprisingly. I bet you they tried, but I bet you they just couldn't get the rights or something. But whatever. Seeing a basically a battle between the two is fun. Is it a deep story? No, but you do have a couple of really likable main characters, and you have some pretty Hollywoodized punks. And I was going to be out of this movie almost just because of how Hollywoodized they are. Just the fashion and stuff is kind of very 80s movie punk fashion. But as this movie goes on, I kind of appreciated it because this whole thing is a heightened, not a really, really real world version of those events. So I still ended up thinking it was fun. And the main characters were very, very likable. And there's some animated sequences that went with them that really made them likable. It was basically just a young dude and a young woman. And she's like, it looks like it's just, they're a mixed couple. There's a whole variety of races and stuff in this underground club, which is fitting because they're going to be fighting the Nazis. And even the owner of the club, who they have a big thing on the wall saying, no racism, no sexism, no homophobia, no violence, no all these things. And he's like, we have it on the wall. You want me to break that and fight these Nazis? And they're like, but they're Nazis. And he's like, all right, it's worth it. So that kind of shows you how strongly this movie is like, we're against Nazis. That's basically this whole movie. We're against Nazis, and if you think we're woke, too bad. The second story is Don't Fight the Feeling, about these two friends, two young women, and oh boy, I did write their names down. Entice, played by Normani, and Barbie, played by Dominique Thorne. If there's any unknown actors in this movie, well, not unknown, but relatively unknown actors in this movie that you should circle, which I literally did on my paper here, Normani and Dominique Thorne really are awesome. You could have a whole movie on just their little sequence. That's kind of the takeaway from this movie too. Like in anthologies, a lot of times there's one really great story and the other ones are like, whatever. These ones, each one of them could have been a movie. Maybe the first one would to me be the weakest in some ways, but they're all the way they interact makes it so much fun anyway. But this second one with Entice and Barbie, they are kind of picked off the street by Too Short's crew, told they need to come to this rap battle. And the whole sequence is basically just them wanting to go to this rap battle. And there's not even a reason you think they should be at the rap battle because you haven't seen them rap or anything at this point. They just seem like some young women on the street who have a little bit of attitude because when the Nazis come by, of course, they flip them off too. You're like thinking, oh, they're going to crash and burn at this rap battle, and I won't tell you what happens, but they basically have to have a rap battle with Too Short, and it's a classic setup. It's executed in an incredibly fun way, and just their characters are so awesome. I mean, they're so great throughout. And I have to say, in their story, there's an awesome moment where they're working at an ice cream shop, and Ben Mendelsohn comes in, and Ben Mendelsohn is a super creepy cop dude, and there are two African American women, right? And the way he's hitting on them is just gross and just kind of accentuating once again the Nazi racism aspect of this movie. It's a fantastic scene. And more on Ben Mendelsohn. He's awesome in this movie too. Okay, third story is Born to Mac. That stars Pedro Pascal, which you see him all over the movie poster. Pedro Pascal is Clint. There is a cameo by a very famous actor. I guess I'll leave it because it's kind of fun if you can discover the cameo. Maybe Greg and Eric have already given away the cameo. It's a really fun cameo as a video store clerk. And I will say there's this moment where the video store clerk says the five best underdog movies of all time. And then he gets to number one and he isn't able to finish it because of the thought, because Pedro has to run and do something for his story, and it never gets paid off. I thought it was going to pay off after the credits, and it didn't. Never pays off what the number one underdog movie of all time is. At the end of this cinematic, I will spoil who I think the number one movie is that they never stated. So there you go. Anyway, Pedro Pascal is an enforcer. He's like the strong man. He's kind of like in Rocky. You know, Rocky got his start going out and breaking legs for people, and then he would eventually try to make it as the boxer, famous boxer Rocky. Well, Pedro has a similar thing. He wants to get out of the business of breaking legs. Essentially, his pregnant wife is wanting him to become a family man, and he's decided he kind of wants to do that. And his story is kind of that age old story of, can the guy who's lived this bad life escape it and realize a fulfilling, non-violent, non-crime based life? And or will his chickens come home to roost? Will the seeds that he's sown of violence in his life come back to haunt him? And that's kind of the basis of his story. Once again, it's really good. He's great. And it could have been a whole movie all on itself. And when I got to the end of it, I was kind of dissatisfied because I was like, oh my gosh, it didn't really quite pay off. But the way these stories interconnect allows it to pay off in the final act. And I will just say that. And what do you got to say about Pedro? He's awesome in whatever he's in. And the final one is The Legend of Sleepy Floyd. As I mentioned, Sleepy Floyd is a famous Golden State Warrior basketball player. This whole movie takes place around a very, very, very famous event involving Sleepy Floyd, a record that he set that has never been broken to this day. Remember, this takes place in '87. That's pretty incredible that there's something he's never been beaten since then. Even all the great basketball players, Sleepy Floyd holds a record. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You can look it up or you can watch the movie. But this story, if you weren't down, I think, for this movie until now, I think this final story, once again, you do the final story, you make it the most fun. And that they did that here, the most fun. I don't even want to tell you hardly what happens in the story other than to say it takes place on the night of this incredible event for him in real life. And then it imagines what had happened if during that incredible event a tragedy occurred. And then what would Sleepy Floyd do to right that wrong? And I am not going to tell you how it plays out, but it plays out very well. You get Ben Mendelsohn reappearing. He appears, I think, in 3 of the 4. Ben Mendelsohn plays an awesome villain in this movie. He is the de facto, if the Nazi punks, racists, are the main villains of the movie, then Ben Mendelsohn is the specific villain of the movie, and he is just relishing and eating up his role. And then a very, very satisfying, super fun ending. I'm 5 stars in this movie. I talked a lot about this movie. I'm sorry, but it's a 5-star movie for me. I can see some people thinking it's just too lightweight and not really, I don't know, not heavy enough or not serious enough or whatever. Which I love heavy, serious movies, but this movie is just fun, satisfying. It's a 4 hamburger meal in a 5-star movie. There you go. I think Eric will appreciate that review, whether he agrees with it or not. He'll appreciate the review. 4 hamburger meal in a 5-star movie.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care.